Imagine a world where every threat, ransomware, supply chain attacks, zero-day exploits is stopped before it can even begin. ThreatLocker makes that world a reality with a zero-trust approach to cybersecurity. By giving you granular control on every executable that can happen in your environment, ThreatLocker protects your business around the clock. No more guessing, no more gaps. Just rock-solid protection that keeps your operations running smoothly and your data secure. Discover how ThreatLocker's least privilege approach can safeguard your organization against known and unknown threats. Take the first step towards total peace of mind. Visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker today. The threat landscape is constantly evolving, making it nearly impossible for security teams to keep up. That's why so many top companies turn to Tines, a security orchestration and automation platform built by security practitioners for security practitioners. Tines empowers analysts and engineers to automate their most repetitive, time-consuming tasks. No coding expertise required, just the flexibility to tailor workflows to your team's exact needs. Ready to break free from the limitations of traditional tools? Learn more at securityweekly.com/Tines. Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Jason Albuquerque and Ben Carr. Identiverse 2025 is returning to Las Vegas June 3rd to 6th. Hear from 250 plus expert speakers and connect with over 3,000 identity security professionals across 4 days of keynotes, breakout sessions, and deep dives into the latest identity security trends. Plus, take part in hands-on workshops and explore the brand new non-human identity pavilion. Register now and save 25% with code IDV25-SecurityWeekly by visiting securityweekly.com/IDV 2025. All right, guys, article time. And so, of course, I had to put the first article in there first to get Jason riled up for this segment.
This is feeling like a trend.
You thought it would just be Jason that got riled up on this?
Come on fire right out of the gate.
Come on, I do this on purpose, right? I always put these articles at the beginning.
Makes for a good show.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start with this one. I mean, yes, hello, Mr. Obvious. There is a clash between CISOs and CIOs, right? Like, it's just, so yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the collaboration strategies they talk out compared to the root of the conflict, I think the conflicts in here, it makes sense for everybody. Challenges here, I don't think on these collaboration strategies, many of them really solve the core underlying problems, right? I mean, balance security and business agility, advocate for shared budgets. That made no sense to me. Like, a shared budget with the CIO, if the reporting structure is wrong, is always going to result in the thumb being pressed upon the CISO's head saying, hey, we're taking this out of your budget, right? Like, I don't know. I just didn't see, Jason, I don't know if you thought differently, but I didn't see a lot of strategies here that really got to the problem.
Definitely not. Definitely not. And I look at the CISO-CIO relationship as competing priorities almost by design. I mean, think about the organization and what the roles of these two leaders are. One of them is to get innovation out with the least amount of friction possible. The other is to protect the organization and potentially creating a little bit of friction or slowdown to getting the innovation out the door to minimize risk, to secure data, to keep clients and employees secure. So it's a little bit of that yin and the yang, right? I equate it to sales and service delivery. A lot of times you have sales folks out there selling anything they possibly can, and then the service delivery people need to worry about how to deliver it later, right? And it's that yin and the yang. It's the natural back and forth.
That's the core part of the problem, right, Jason? I mean, when we look 100%. At this, it always comes back to, I put it even, I guess, simpler, right? If you think about like old legacy infrastructure days, availability versus security, right? And security is always compete with availability.
Yeah, no, 100%. And at the end of the day, I think the biggest strategy to be able to get these two executives in line and working together seamlessly, or as seamlessly as possible, is the one thing we talk about all the time: support from the top. It is board and CEO level support to be able to sit there with both of those executives and make business decisions together, or maybe be a tiebreaker, or maybe be able to have conversations with both sides and get everybody on the same page. But that support from the top is critical.
Yeah, and that's what I was looking for in this article is it says, and how to fix it, but it doesn't appear that any of the fixes are the right fixes, right? Because it is more of that kind of cultural alignment from the top.
That's right.
And being able to drive that through. Now, aligning with the business and having clear communication channels definitely are part of that. But the initial friction doesn't start there necessarily. No. And I think that's where you need some of the bigger executive buy-in.
100%, because that's going to be the tiebreaker for the competing priorities. You're going to have someone who wants to mitigate risk and someone who wants to get innovation out the door as fast as they possibly can, because their career, their performance, potentially their paycheck, right, depends on that.
Right.
So you need the tiebreaker. You need a CEO or a board of directors saying, you want to know what? Our risk appetite is allowing us to get that innovation out the door quicker. So CISO, you're off the hot seat. Or it's too much risk, CIO. You need to slow down because we're going to make a good business decision here.
Yeah. And that's having better alignment at the executive business level.
Exactly it. That's the core. That's the crux of it all.
All right. So now Article 2. SolarWinds CISO says security executives are nervous about individual liability for data breaches. You don't say.
Yeah. Because
I would expect that after a heart attack, Quinn would feel that way.
That started it all. No, I mean, in all honesty, it's we've talked about it so many times on the show, and I think we're going to talk about it a little bit later too. When so many CISOs are starting to convert to the consultancy side now because of limiting liability, and unfortunately, the protections just aren't in place now for CISOs to feel comfortable putting their name on that level of risk, right? Because we've talked about it. We're not on directors and officers insurance. We don't have support from the top. We're still being treated as scapegoats when an issue happens. We're not sharing that responsibility across all of the executives, namely the CEO at the top level, when issues happen. So there's way too much risk, and it's not just from a professional side of the aisle. It's a personal risk as well, which took it over the top.
Yeah.
It took it over the top.
Yep.
Yeah, which is, I was just going to say, I think it's unlikely that liability is going to be limited, like from a law perspective, right? Like, I don't think anyone would pass that, right? Like, you could think on the CFO side, no one's going to say, if the CFO does something wrong, like, we're not going to hold them liable from a financial side. Like, that's just the nature of the beast. But I think something needs to happen where the liability isn't all encapsulated and fall on the CISO. It's got to be across the larger estate of the C-level executives, because kind of as we talked about in the last article, this really goes back to where does the budgeting and authority come from, right? And hence the responsibility. So if all the responsibility is on the CISO, but he has none of the ability to create or define budget appropriately or to get buy-in, or if it's always a trade-off of, hey, we need to sell more stuff, let's not worry about defending the estate until we sell more stuff. Like, you're always going to be on your back foot. So I think that's where the transition has to happen. And ultimately, that's where liability has to go. But CISOs have to think about their own personal liability and how we look at that moving forward.
And Tim actually covers it very well in this article, because, CEOs of the world and board of directors of the world, listen to this, law of unintended consequences. He basically says that they're in the middle of incident response, and the things going through his head are, I don't know if I should expose this deficiency.
Yeah.
I don't know if I should say what made us liable. I don't know if I should, and he goes through how he's double checking himself and wasting that time. He says 20% of his brain got spent thinking about liability instead of response.
Well, and compound that, like, let's say your reporting structure is up through the CIO.
Yep.
Like, now you're saying, okay, well, I don't even know if I can say that, because is that going to put me in a bad light in my boss who writes my review and does my raises and performance analysis, like all that stuff. You're basically saying, by definition, if something goes wrong for the CISO, it's happening in something IT related, right?
Right.
And so if that's the case, and you either don't own that or you're attached under that stream, it puts you in a real conflict of interest, right? Like, what do you 100%. Say and how do you handle it? Real problem.
Yeah, it is. And this is where I think Sarbanes-Oxley got some things right, in that the CEO and the CFO had to sign off on the financial statements, right? Together. You almost need the same structure here, where it's either the CEO, the CFO, and the CISO sign off, right? Because that changes the liability. Then I think you get the same protections as a CEO, CFO would with D&O and officers insurance and all the other stuff that would take some of that liability off the plate. But we're not there as an industry. Yeah. And therefore, I think it just puts a lot of extra pressure and burden on the CISO themselves.
Absolutely.
Which is why we get to article number 3, why security leaders are opting for consulting gigs.
all of the above.
Yeah, and in here it says, can the pendulum swing in the other direction? I don't think so.
I don't know. Well, as I was looking through, reading all of these articles, right? And I sat back and Ben, you know this, and Matt, you know this, just from working in business. We've had these things forever called RACI charts. Who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, who's informed. We don't have that for the CISO. What is the CISO responsible for? What should they be accountable for? When are they consulted and considered, a consultant to the organization? When are they in a position where they just need to be informed about what's happening? And that's creating so much discourse in the CISO role, so much confusion and liability and risk, right? That's why we're jumping ship. Let's go be a consultant. You know what? Let's go use our talent, still help organizations out, but we don't have that liability, and we don't have that lack of support from the top.
Well, and it talks about this in the section. It says CISOs need top-down support, unclear or unrealistic breadth of accountability. Back to your RACI chart. What am I accountable for? Well, that should be coming from the CEO, right? And what am I responsible for versus the CIO versus the CTO? We talked about that article last week, right? Mm-hmm. Lay this out and then figure out what the right structure is.
Right. And they put a number in here too. 70% of security IT decision makers said personal liability concerns negatively affect their opinion of the role. 70% of security leaders.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're going to see.
I think this is really leading to burnout too, right?
Absolutely.
It's one of the things that people are thinking about, and one of the things they're concerned with. It's a lot of stress.
Yeah. And you're gonna see this kind of trend come up in the last article too. These numbers are pretty big around just kind of the overall concern and almost unhappiness with the job and the role, right? It's kind of weird, but there's these big numbers behind this unsatisfaction, right? That is not sustainable if we're going to continue to move forward in this industry. All right, the CISO's bookshelf, the 10 must-reads for security leaders. Now, I've only read one of these, so I'm only 1 for 10. I was curious if either of you guys have read.
I actually have, and I got to get back to it. I started reading it, but it's one of those you kind of put down and then it falls off the radar. The one that I have on my shelf is Confronting Cyber Risk, the Embedded Endurance for Strategy for Cybersecurity. So far, pretty good read. I mean, it actually talks about a lot of the things we talk about on this show, to be honest with you, right? How cyber risk isn't just a technical issue, but it's, complex in the operations and legal dimensions and regulatory side of the aisle within your organization. How every company has its own fingerprint and its own profile. And it makes the argument that, and we say this all the time, the way we did things in the past it's not keeping up with the increase in technology, how rapid business is evolving, how rapidly the world is evolving, and we're just not keeping pace. So they have this solution statement or solution set that they want to talk about, and it's really having that embedded endurance. And it's the what we would consider the nirvana of what we would want in an organization where cybersecurity is embedded into all operations of the business. So things we talk about all the time here.
Yeah. Ben, any of these on your bookshelf?
George Finney's book on Zero Trust. So I know George and highly recommend it. He writes a good,
That's funny because we all have different 3. Yeah. I'm How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity Risk, Doug Hubbard and Richard Seierson, right? We've had them on this show twice. Well, we had Seierson on once with Doug, and then we had Doug on separately. This book is part of the cyber risk management conversation. I'm very familiar with this book and the work that they both did. The challenge with me on this book is to see it in practice. It's kind of what we try to do here at CyberSaint. I know Qualys is trying to work on some of this stuff as well, because Richard's over there also. But the ability to measure cybersecurity risk, and what I believe is to be quantified risk in dollars and cents, is a huge benefit for security leaders, I think, to be able to talk about security risk. So definitely a good read there as well. All right. So we got 3 of the 10 between us. So I guess we got some reading to do, boys.
Book club. You need a book club.
Right. Exactly. Next article, leaders can move fast and fix things, right? We always hear this fail fast, right?
Yeah.
Fail fast, fail fast, fail fast. And this article is like, no, you can move fast, but you can also fix things. You don't always have to fail.
Sure. I mean, yeah, but I'm still a fan of fail fast. When you know things are going off the rails, you got to fail fast.
Yeah, true.
The day, right? But no, I think this, the article makes some good points. We talked about it earlier about the that kind of the competing priorities of rapid innovation and security, right? So how do we take that and embed it into the CISO's world? And, some of these points are good, right? I mean, number one, make sure you're focusing on the right problems. Of course, you don't want bad busy, right? You don't want to be wasting your time. We talk about this a lot here. Build trust, build relationships. Make sure that, you're really getting out there and putting the work in to understand the folks that you're collaborating with, your peers, your colleagues within the workplace, right? So you can understand their business. Involve people you don't know, of course, right? You always want to bring in a diverse set of folks to be able to make good decisions. And Matt, this one's yours. Tell a better story. Always tell stories, right?
Yeah.
There's one piece for the security professional that I think this is absolutely missing. But again, for the security professional, know your organization's risk appetite. You cannot move fast and fix things if you're making bad risk decisions as a security leader. You're breaking things.
It's not just implementation of new tools and getting things done. I mean, you have to figure out what aligns with the strategy for the business and how it reduces risk in the most efficient way. I mean, that's But tell a better story. That for me was the one that really resonated, because as a CISO, I think that's the thing a lot of people don't get right, is they don't realize it's about telling a story, architecting a vision for people, right? Letting them know where you're going. And if you just come in and you say, hey, let's just deploy a new tool. Why? Like that doesn't offer any value. Yeah.
Yeah. Back to the golden circle, the why. Always start with the why.
Yeah.
It's right, which is why we try to structure our interviews the way we structure them. Let's start with the problem and the why, and then we can talk about all the fun stuff. But as leaders, telling that better story, telling that story in a way that people understand it, is so important to getting through these transition points. So yeah, I love the last bullet point for sure in this article. Yep. All right, last article. 60% of cybersecurity pros looking to change employers.
You know what? That number's low based on the last number we looked at 70% of cybersecurity leaders not having faith in their role right now. No, I mean, all of these metrics that we're seeing now tell a story, right? It tells a story. The story is cyber leaders are jumping ship.
Well, Jason, this is, the stat here is 60% of cybersecurity pros, right? My wager would be that the scale is much higher, right? The seesaw is much more imbalanced. That at a leadership level, a lot more people are probably looking to leave. And like the entry level guy in cyber who just got in, rose-colored glasses, and he thinks everything's fine, right? And he hasn't figured it out yet. So I think that's probably some of that dysfunction. But I mean, look, burnout's a real thing for people.
In the article, Ben, it says 53% of cybersecurity functional leaders are eyeing the exit.
Yeah, it's got to be that I would say is a lot more than that, but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think the point here is, look, if you don't have a consistent, solid leader at the top, which starts with the CISO position, right? If the CISO's changing jobs every 18 to 24 months, people realize, okay, I got a new leader coming in. Does anything change? Like over time, that trickles down to the rest of the staff, right? Where the staff's now sitting there going, wait a minute, I've got yet another new boss. The last one was only here 18 months. How long is this one going to be here? Like, is this the right place for me? I think it starts at the top. And without the right tone at the top, and without the right, like, solid leadership position at the top, I think this will always be a concern, right?
How can you have an effective security team when the strategies, the leaders, and the goals are leaving every couple of years.
Right.
And I see it in my peer group. There is someone in my peer group that I know that worked for 2 years as a CISO, jumped for a couple of years as a CRO, chief risk officer, jumped for a couple of years as a CISO again, then a VP of security. So it's like 2-year stint, 2-year stint, 2-year stint, 2-year stint, all new organizations. How do you get any type of structure? How do you get any type of consistency? How do you get a solid program when you're getting somebody new every 2 years?
Right.
Yeah, but I would even say it goes deeper than that, right? It's like, yeah, sure, that is true about the program, but so companies haven't made that commitment to their leaders, right? Like companies haven't said for the CISO, like we're going to give you time to execute on this. We're going to structure this appropriately. We're going to set a foundation where you can build the right program on. Look, I'm not saying don't measure, come up with statistics, come up with analysis that says if you're being successful or not. But like, I just don't see a lot of commitment on the level of companies to make this work, right? They think I'm just going to hire some guy and it'll be better than not having somebody. While that is true, it's not the optimal state. The optimal state is hiring the right person and supporting them to get the job done.
It's like when the board goes to hire a new CEO. They're not thinking about a CEO for the next 2 years. They're thinking about a CEO for the next decade to take the business on this path, whatever the board wants them to do. That's how you should be hiring your leaders, including your CISO. You don't want to go hire a CISO saying, we only need him for 2 years. Like, figure out how do you go hire leaders with a duration, a period behind them so that you can give them the runway they need to be successful, help to change the culture, help to stop this uncertainty that causes all this turnover, right? Because that's what's happening. And so you almost have to treat the CISO like a CEO. Yeah.
But at the end of it, guys, and I'm probably going to piss a lot of people off when I say this, I don't think we've done ourselves any favors as a CISO. I really don't.
I don't disagree with you.
In an instance like I just talked about, do you think 4 different organizations over the course of 8 years, they all did it wrong? Or do you think but, right? Because of the example I just gave, or maybe there wasn't the patience enough. Some organizations don't know what the hell they're doing, especially if you're the first CISO ever. And 18 months is not enough patience to change a company. It's just not. Yeah. Right? You have to dig in. You have to do the hard work. You have to educate. You have to change hearts and minds. You got to communicate. You got to muscle up sometimes and get shit done. I mean, that's just part of it, right? So I don't think we're doing ourselves any favors by jumping ship all the time either.
I don't necessarily disagree with you, Jason, but I will say, like, having talked to a lot of colleagues, and I know specific instances I could call out with specific companies, right, where I know that they've been through 2 or 3 CISOs, and going back and looking, then asking, like, the second guy who came in after the first guy, like, hey, what was the problem? It mirrors the same thing the first guy says. If you go to the third guy, he mirrors the same thing the first guy say. Like it's the definition of insanity. It's repeating the same thing and expecting a different result, right? And I don't disagree that we need to think about this and people should be committed to roles that they accept. But I do see a lot of times just people get into situations where it's ultimately not their fault, right? Do they contribute? Probably. But there's a lot that companies are bringing kind of as baggage to the table, right? Or just not understanding at all what they're trying to do. And that's very, very challenging.
And that's why I think the hiring process on both sides is so important.
I just think we have skin in the game too, guys. That's all I'm trying to say. I get it. There are organizations out there that, they're just not doing what they need to do. And we talk about that on this show all the time. But I think my point is there's a couple of different perspectives here, and I don't think we're doing ourselves any favors, so.
Yeah. No, I agree. Look, I mean, we can apply this to sports, Jason, right? You can definitely take a very similar angle, the player and the coaching side of the equation. Right?
There you go.
Exactly. Right? And so how do you build a championship winning team when you're constantly changing your quarterback every 2 years? You're not. Right.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly it.
All right, I'm going to leave it on that note. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.